Chapter 64. Large-scale healing through touching of the Lord's coat. All are amazed about such fortifying sleep, even whilst the sun is already shining unto the mountain tops. Ebal at once organizes his wives to take care of a freshly and well-prepared morning meal. And the women, together with the older daughters, at once attend to an abundant and good morning meal, finding that easy, since their larders are crammed from top to bottom. The Pharisees have already taken their table over in the dining hall, leaving no room for anyone else to sit at their table. And Ebal immediately had them served with bread, wine, a few roasted fish, and honey. Only after these were finished did Ebal have another large table set for myself, my disciples, the centurion, and Ebal and his wives and children. Before entering the hall, however, I had Ebal bring all the sick waiting for me into the big hall, and tell them that they had only to touch my coat, and they would get well at once. Ebal went and carried out my order. Thereupon I entered the dining hall with the centurion, my disciples, and little Jarrah, who would not part with me by one step, and sat down at the table without glancing at a Pharisee, let alone greet one, something that was a big thing with them. When I and the centurion and the disciples were seated, close on 200 sick entered the dining hall asking me if they could touch the hem of my garment. And I let them, even while I and my disciples and the others partook of the morning meal. Soon everyone that was sick crowded around me, touching the surface of my coat, and all who touched it became well. Matthew chapter 14, verse 6. But the supremely jealous Pharisees and scribes hid behind some of the sick, saying to them covertly, "Do not touch the coat of the Nazarene, who we already know, and you still will be healed." And those who allowed to be persuaded by the Pharisees and did not touch my coat stayed ill. Upon realizing this, they came to me again to ask me if they could touch my coat. However, I rebuked them and said, "Have you come for the sake of me or those Pharisees who talked you out of it to touch my coat? Those you believed should also help you. Go to them." This the Pharisees easily overheard and turned red hot with rage. They soon come over to me, and their chief said to me, "So you are the one on whose account we had to go from Jerusalem to Nazareth?" To such question I give the chief no answer, but the centurion in my proximity, sitting at the table to my right, says with thunderous voice, "Yes, this is the one whose countenance you miserable ones are not worthy eternally to behold. Why did you dissuade those poor from touching his garment, so that they might have gotten well like their companions? You miserable dogs! Do you really in this world know no better than to make people unhappy at every opportunity?" Here I give the centurion a sign to relent somewhat, or there could be unpleasant things. And whilst relenting, the centurion nonetheless demands the chief to conscientiously give a reason why he prevented some of the sick from touching the divine master's garment, so that they would have gotten well like the others. Somewhat embarrassed, the chief says, "We only wanted to convince ourselves that only those got well who touched your raiment. And we are sure now that only those who touched the Master's raiment got well, and we put no further obstacle to what can make them well. Here the sick get up, saying, "Oh, if we were not so sick, miserable and weak, then we would, for trying out on us whether we would get well too, without touching the divine Saviour's raiment, give you a reward that would give you an eternity to think about." Nevertheless, postponement doesn't mean calling it off. We shall yet somehow, with God's help, get well, and then meet you somewhere. Then you can beware of what we shall do with you. However, I say to the sick, revenge be distant from your hearts. If you want me to heal you, ban all rage and revenge from your hearts. Thereupon the sick say, "Master, for the sake of you, we do whatever you want from us. Only free also us mentally handicapped from our sufferings." Say I, "Thus come and touch my garment." Here the sick went and touched the hem of my overcoat, and all of the sudden all became perfectly cured. And the centurion, agitated, said, "Now, you blind seers from the so-called holy city of God, are you now convinced that the man about whom you are so despicably ill-informed, and whom you went out to examine and to catch, is this evil person whom you described to me yesterday?" Says the chief and also the other Pharisees, "That an extraordinary healing power goes forth from him, we are now more than convinced. But it is far from follows that he accomplishes this out of some kind of godly power, because with him and those sitting at table with him, we note that they don't keep the ordinances of the elders, and in view of such, there can absolutely be no talk of any godliness." Says the commander, "This I do not understand. Speak to him personally about this."